I Fucked a Merman. By Lisa Fay. Chapter 1. The sea always called to me, its whispers threading through the crash of waves and the sigh of the wind. Even in the chill of autumn, when the beach lay empty and the water turned frigid, I felt its pull. It wasn't just a place, it was a force, ancient and restless, always humming in the background of my thoughts. It was on one of those days, alone with the sea, that I first saw him. A shadow on the rocks, barely more than a flicker in the corner of my eye. I stopped mid-step, blinking against the pale afternoon light, thinking it was some illusion cast by the waves. Then I saw them, his eyes. Sapphire blue, impossibly bright even from a distance. They locked onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. I could have sworn I saw a glimmer of scales across his skin, shimmering green like sunlight on a wave. But in the blink of an eye, he was gone. Just a splash of water and an empty rock, as though he'd never been there at all. For hours, the image lingered in my mind, those piercing eyes, the flash of something otherworldly. But I brushed it off as a trick of the light, or maybe the remnants of some childhood daydream. After all, I was alone in this old seaside house, as I always was when my aunt left on her annual travels. My aunt's house stood on the edge of a cliff, perched precariously over the sea as if daring the waves to claim it. It was a relic of another time, its wooden beams weathered gray by salt and wind. Inside, it smelled of aged wood and lavender, with shelves stuffed with dusty books and jars filled with everything from dried herbs to sea glass. My aunt was an odd woman, the kind who spoke of omens and believed the sea had its moods. The sea takes what it wants, she'd say, her gray eyes as sharp as the gulls overhead. And sometimes, it gives something back. I didn't think much of her words then. But that night, I woke suddenly, pulled from sleep as if by invisible hands. My chest was tight, my skin damp with sweat, though the house was as quiet as always. The wind outside had died, leaving only the faint rumble of the waves far below. I sat up and went to the window, the old floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, its glow spilling over the sea like molten silver. Something about it seemed alive, as though the light itself was beckoning me. Without thinking, I grabbed a jacket and stepped outside, drawn by a pull I couldn't explain. The air was biting cold, but I barely felt it as I made my way down the winding path to the beach. The waves glistened in the moonlight, crashing softly against the rocks, and there, on the very same rock where I had seen him earlier, he sat. He was even more vivid under the moonlight, his chestnut hair tousled as though the wind and waves had shaped it themselves. His skin glistened faintly, as though kissed by the sea, and his back arched with a power that was both human and something far wilder. I froze, unable to breathe as I took in every detail, the ripple of his muscles, the shimmer of green scales at his hips, the way his tail curved gracefully into the water below. The merman was an ethereal vision, as though carved from dreams and cast in sunlight. His upper body was a masterpiece of masculine beauty. His sapphire blue eyes seemed to shimmer, catching the light like twin gems submerged in a crystal clear sea. His chestnut hair was tousled, falling in uneven strands across his face and neck, as if perpetually windswept by the ocean breeze. Every muscle of his back, sculpted and lean, moved fluidly as he lay sprawled across the rock, his skin glistening faintly as though kissed by seawater. From his broad shoulders to the curve of his waist, his form was undeniably human, powerful yet graceful. The contour of his back ended just beneath the small of his spine, where the flesh of his lower body began to change, merging seamlessly into something otherworldly. The faint sheen of delicate green scales emerged near his hips, growing more prominent as they transitioned into the tail, a magnificent creation of aquatic beauty. As he shifted slightly on the rock, his abs tensed, revealing the ridges of muscle that accentuated his torso. The movement was unguarded, a display of raw strength coupled with an air of innocence, as though he was unaware, or unbothered, by the gaze upon him. His stomach tapered into a V shape, leading the eye downward. And there, resting in front of him, his form diverged from human expectations in the most startling way. His manhood was both striking and unusual, reminiscent of a dolphin's intimate anatomy, a subtle reminder that he was as much a creature of the sea as of land. It hung naturally, unashamed, lending a primal beauty to his hybrid nature. Just below, the inner sides of his thighs merged, the skin giving way entirely to shimmering green scales that ran the length of his powerful tail. The tail itself was mesmerizing, a fusion of strength and elegance. The scales shifted hues as the light caught them, moving between emerald and jade with every ripple. It culminated in two long, semi-transparent fins at the very end, like silk ribbons flowing in an unseen current. They flicked occasionally, catching the sun's rays in a prism of color, as if alive with the ocean's essence. He turned his head slightly, and his eyes locked with mine. In that moment, I felt as if the world had stopped. The delicate interplay of humanity and mystique in his form was otherworldly, and I was left wondering if he was real, or merely the echo of some ancient oceanic myth brought to life. Our gazes lingered, his sapphire blue eyes holding me captive. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't believe what I was seeing. The moonlight caught the glimmer of his scales, the faint rise and fall of his chest as he lay there, watching me. It was as though the sea itself had come alive, given form in this impossibly beautiful, otherworldly being. A part of me wanted to take a step closer, to reach out and confirm he was real. My pulse quickened, and I felt the cold sand shift beneath my feet as I leaned forward slightly. But then he moved, just the slightest flick of his tail, and it was enough to break whatever spell I was under. I stumbled back, heart pounding, the reality of what I was seeing crashing down on me like the waves against the shore. My instincts took over. I turned and ran, my breath ragged as I climbed the familiar path back to the house. The night air burned in my lungs, but I didn't stop until I was inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I collapsed onto the floor, my back pressed against the door as though I could barricade myself from the memory. My chest heaved as I struggled to steady my breath, the sound of my pulse loud in my ears. What had I seen? What was he? The house was as silent as ever, the ticking of the old clock in the hallway the only sound breaking the stillness. I pressed my palms to my face, trying to ground myself, but every time I closed my eyes, his image returned, those eyes, that shimmering tail, the raw, untamed power in his presence. It wasn't real, I whispered to myself. It couldn't be. The next morning, the sunlight spilling through the curtains felt almost mocking in its warmth. The night before seemed distant now, like a vivid dream that was already starting to fade at the edges. I busied myself with chores, tidying the house, rearranging the books my aunt had left scattered across her sitting room. Anything to keep my mind from wandering back to the sea. But by midday, the pull became impossible to ignore. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but still, I found myself walking the path back down to the beach. The waves lapped gently at the shore, the rock where I'd seen him bathed in sunlight. It was just a rock now, ordinary, unmoving. I waded into the water, the chill biting at my legs, hoping to shake the feeling of unease that clung to me. The sea, usually so comforting, felt strange today, like it was hiding something just out of reach. I dove beneath the surface, letting the cold embrace me, but even as I swam, my eyes darted around, searching. Nothing. By the time I returned to the house, the sun was sinking low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I tried to push the thoughts away again, convincing myself it was just my imagination, a lingering childhood fantasy sparked by the ocean's mystique. Chapter 2. That night, I woke abruptly, my chest heaving as if I'd been running in my dreams. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moon outside my window. I sat up, my skin damp with sweat, the same strange pull tugging at me again, stronger now, more insistent. I moved to the window and pulled back the curtain, my breath catching as I looked out over the sea. The moon was full again, its light casting a silvery path across the waves. And for a moment, it felt as though the sea itself was alive, its whispers threading through the wind, calling my name. I didn't stop to think. I threw on the jacket and headed for the beach, the pull too strong to resist this time. The air was cold, the kind of chill that sank into your bones, but I barely noticed it as I walked. My feet carried me with a purpose I didn't understand, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. And then I saw him. He was there again, perched on the same rock, his form bathed in the moonlight. The sight of him stole the breath from my lungs, his sapphire eyes locking onto mine as though he'd been waiting for me. My breath hitched as he moved. The water rippled around him, his powerful tail slicing through the waves as he swam closer to the shore. Moonlight danced on the surface, illuminating the emerald and jade shimmer of his scales. I should have stepped back, should have run, but my feet were rooted to the sand. My heart thundered in my chest as I watched him approach, closer now than he'd been before. Every logical part of me screamed that this wasn't real, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The tales my aunt used to tell me when I was little, about the sea and its hidden wonders, surfaced in my mind. I laughed at them then, but now, standing here with this impossible creature before me, I wondered, had there been a seed of truth in her stories? He stopped just short of the shallows, where the water grew shallow enough to reveal the full length of his tail. For a moment, he floated there, watching me, his sapphire eyes soft and unthreatening, but piercing all the same. "You need to meet me halfway," he said at last, his voice smooth and deep, like honey laced with the hum of the ocean. It carried over the waves as though the sea itself amplified it. I blinked, the sound of his voice sending a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just beautiful, it was hypnotic, as if each word held a melody that drew me closer. When I didn't respond, he tilted his head slightly, his chestnut hair falling over one eye. "My tail won't magically disappear," he added, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "No legs will take its place to walk your world, I'm afraid." Something about the way he said it made me want to laugh, though the sound caught in my throat. I didn't speak, didn't move, but I felt a small smile tugging at my lips despite myself. He noticed, his own smile deepening as he regarded me. For a moment, I thought he might move closer still, but then he shifted, his fins flicking beneath the water. "Perhaps another time," he said softly, his gaze lingering on mine for one more moment. And then he turned, diving beneath the waves in a graceful arc, his tail cutting through the water before disappearing entirely. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sea where he'd been, my mind racing. The sound of his voice lingered, wrapping around me like a warm current. It was too vivid to be a dream. The way his hair had gleamed in the moonlight, the way his scales shimmered like liquid emeralds, I couldn't have imagined that. Eventually, the chill of the night air brought me back to myself. My legs felt shaky as I turned away from the shore and made my way back up to the house. Every step felt heavier than the last, my mind replaying the encounter over and over. By the time I crawled into bed, I couldn't think of anything else. His voice echoed in my head, smooth and sweet, sending shivers down my spine with every remembered word. Those eyes, his hair, the way he had smiled, it was all burned into me, as though the sea had left its mark. I pulled the blankets tighter around me, my heart still racing even as my body ached for rest. It wasn't a dream. It couldn't have been. Chapter 3. The morning sun hung low, casting its golden light over the water. The sea was calm, its surface rippling gently, as though still half asleep. I walked along the shore, my feet sinking into the cool, damp sand with each step. I hadn't come here looking for him, at least, that's what I told myself. But as I approached the spot where I'd seen him before, I felt my heart quicken. I slowed, scanning the waves for any sign of him. For a long moment, there was nothing but the endless expanse of blue, stretching out to meet the horizon. And then, there he was. He broke the surface gracefully, his chestnut hair plastered to his face, droplets of water clinging to his skin like scattered diamonds. His eyes found mine immediately, those sapphire blue depths holding a quiet intensity that made me forget to breathe. I didn't run this time. Instead, I stepped into the water, the coolness biting at my ankles, then my calves, until I was sitting in the shallows. The sand shifted beneath me as the waves lapped at my thighs. He swam closer, stopping just a few feet away. He was breathtaking. In the daylight, the hues of his scales were even more vivid, shimmering like a mosaic of emeralds and jade. His fins moved lazily beneath the water, sending soft tribbles toward me. "You came back," he said, his voice smoother than I remembered, like the sea itself had wrapped around his words. I hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure if you were real, I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. His lips curved into a faint smile. I couldn't help but smile back, the tension in my chest easing slightly. Do you make a habit of haunting beaches and confusing people, or is it just me? He chuckled, the sound low and rich, like the distant roll of thunder. Only when it's worth it. The air between us hummed with a quiet intensity. I shifted in the water, still unsure how to respond to that. I'm not sure I understand, I admitted. His eyes glimmered, almost knowingly. You don't need to. Not yet. Just know that I'm here. I met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle in me like the ocean's tide. Before I could respond, he flicked his tail, sending a small spray of water in my direction. I gasped, my reflexes kicking in as I swiped my hand through the water and splashed him back. His laughter rang out, filling the space between us. Careful now, he teased, his tone light. You're in my element. I raised an eyebrow, a playful challenge in my expression. Is that supposed to scare me? He tilted his head, the sunlight catching the strands of his hair. Not scare. Impress. His fins flicked again, creating a ripple that swirled around me. It wasn't threatening, but it felt intentional, like he was testing the boundary between us. We fell into a companionable silence, the sound of the waves filling the gap. His gaze softened as he studied me, and I found myself wondering what he saw. Finally, I sighed and shifted slightly in the water. I should go. He didn't stop me but watched as I pushed myself to my feet, the water cascading off my legs. Just as I turned to leave, a small wave rolled toward me, stronger than the others. I stumbled slightly, then noticed something glinting in the surf near my feet. A seashell. I bent to pick it up, its surface smooth and iridescent, reflecting a rainbow of colors in the sunlight. I looked back at him, surprised. He grinned, a mischievous spark in his eyes. Something to remember me by. Until we meet again. Before I could reply, he dove beneath the water, his tail breaking the surface in a graceful arc before vanishing entirely. I stood there for a long moment, the shell clutched in my hand, staring at the spot where he'd disappeared. The sea was calm again, as if he'd never been there at all. But as I made my way back to the house, the shell in my hand felt heavier than it should have, as though it carried the weight of a promise I didn't fully understand. After that brief encounter, I couldn't help but feel an eager anticipation for the moon to rise that evening, a strange yet thrilling energy coursing through me. I busied myself around the house, throwing myself into chores that didn't need doing. I polished the already gleaming countertops, rearranged the books on the dusty shelf in the study, and even took the time to scrub a few scuff marks off the tiled kitchen floor. Anything to keep my hands occupied and my thoughts from drifting back to him. But it was useless. His voice lingered in my mind, soft as a lullaby and yet powerful enough to quicken my pulse. The way his words seemed to weave themselves into my very breath, like the sea had taken root inside me, left me shaken. At one point, as I was folding laundry, a simple memory of his faint smile sent heat rushing to my cheeks. I froze, staring blankly at the towel in my hands. Why was I blushing? I wasn't a love-struck teenager, yet here I was, acting like a high school girl with a crush. I was in my early 30s for God's sake, and yet, there was something about him, about the way the sea wrapped around him, that made me feel more alive than I had in years. I glanced out the window. The sun was beginning to dip lower, its golden light stretching across the waves, but it still wasn't enough. I wanted the day to hurry up and end, wanted the moon to climb high into the sky so I'd have an excuse to go back to the beach. The hours crawled by, the minutes marked by my growing restlessness. By the time dusk finally arrived, I couldn't sit in the house a moment longer. Chapter 4. The air outside was cool, tinged with the salty tang of the sea, and I welcomed it as I made my way down the familiar path. The beach was bathed in the warm hues of twilight, the sky an ever-changing canvas of orange and deep indigo. I found myself heading to the same small alcove as before, the one nestled between jagged rocks where the water always seemed calmer, quieter, almost as though it were waiting, too. I stood at the water's edge, the hem of my dress brushing against the damp sand. The tide lapped at my toes, chilly but not unpleasant. Slowly, I dipped one foot into the water, then the other, wading in bit by bit as the coolness seeped into my skin. The gentle waves kissed my ankles, then my knees, and I inhaled sharply as the water climbed higher, brushing against my waist. By the time it reached my chest, my body had grown used to the chill, and I found myself easing into its embrace, letting the coolness soothe the restless energy thrumming inside me. I waded out a little further until the ground beneath my feet began to slope downward. The sea cradled me like an old friend as I let myself float, my arms drifting lazily at my sides. The water was clear, cool, and still, so still I could see the faint shimmer of my legs below, moving gently to keep myself afloat. My hands tapped softly against the surface of the water, creating tiny ripples that spread out in all directions. The sensation of the sea sliding between my fingers felt oddly intimate, almost like a conversation, though I didn't know what it was saying. I tipped my head back, staring up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to peek through the fading dusk. My bright red hair fanned out around me, drifting in the water like crimson seaweed, and I closed my eyes, just for a moment. The quiet was soothing, but beneath it was a subtle tension, a sense of anticipation I couldn't shake. I had hoped he'd be here, perched on the rock again, his gaze fixed on me with that curious intensity. But the rock was empty, and the only sound was the rhythmic lapping of the waves. I swam a little deeper, letting the water brush against my shoulders and tug lightly at the strands of my hair. It was peaceful, but my thoughts refused to settle. Had I imagined him? Was it possible that the sea was simply playing tricks on me? I turned onto my back, floating effortlessly as my legs moved beneath me, slow and graceful. My hands dipped below the surface, skimming the cool water, and I felt my breathing slow as I tried to convince myself that I was here just for the ocean, for its beauty, its calm, its pull. And yet, with every ripple, every gentle whisper of the tide, I couldn't stop wondering, was he watching? Was he somewhere beneath the surface, waiting, or was he gone? The thought made my chest tighten, and I found myself treading water again, as though searching for something just beyond reach. The sea felt alive around me, charged with a quiet energy that made my skin tingle. I didn't know how long I stayed there, letting the water carry me, but the longer I lingered, the more I felt it, an undeniable pull, as though the sea itself wanted me to stay. The moment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. And then I felt him. At first, it was subtle, barely perceptible, like the faintest ripple in the water beneath me. But then the sensation grew stronger, a movement circling below, deliberate, predatory, almost teasing. My breath caught as I tried to focus, scanning the water, but I saw nothing, only the pale gleam of my legs suspended in the shimmering blue. The circling tightened, drawing closer, the invisible presence brushing past my calf so lightly it almost felt like a trick of the current. But it wasn't. It was him. I stilled, my heart pounding as I treaded water, trying to follow the flashes of motion beneath the surface. Whatever he was doing, it was fast, calculated. The movement darted to my left, then right, before stopping altogether. A second of calm passed, and then, something coiled around my legs, swift and unyielding. It wasn't rough, but it was firm, almost like being ensnared by the body of a serpent. My breath hitched, and before I could process what was happening, he surfaced. He rose from the water with an effortless grace, his face emerging mere inches from mine, droplets clinging to his skin like scattered stars. His hair was slick, clinging to his forehead, but his eyes, they burned, intense and gleaming with an otherworldly light. His tail, the very thing that had wrapped around me, tightened slightly, its smooth, scaled texture brushing against my skin. It was inescapable yet strangely gentle, holding me in place with a possessive kind of ease. "Are you not afraid?" he asked, his voice low and smooth, dripping with a quiet intensity. "Afraid that I might drag you under? To meet your end at the bottom of the sea?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, as his words wrapped around me as tightly as his tail. His gaze held mine captive, his expression unreadable, and I felt utterly exposed beneath his penetrating stare. He tilted his head slightly, his lips curling into a faint, almost teasing smile. You're silent. Does that mean you trust me, or are you simply too terrified to answer? My lips parted, but no words came. My chest felt heavy, as if the ocean itself was pressing against me, stealing the air from my lungs. And then he moved closer, his hand lifting from the water to trace the line of my lips with the pad of his thumb. His touch was cool, feather-light, and yet it sent a rush of heat through my entire body. "You're trembling," he murmured, his voice softening, though the intensity in his eyes didn't waver. His thumb lingered for a moment longer before his hand dropped, the water lapping gently between us. I finally found my voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. "I wanted to see you again." The words were raw, unpolished, but they hung in the air between us, undeniable. His eyes darkened, a flicker of something unspoken passing through them, and before I could draw another breath, his lips were on mine. The kiss was not soft. It was deep, consuming, as though the weight of the ocean had poured into that single moment. His lips tasted of salt and something wilder, something untamed, and it filled my senses until there was no room for anything else. His tail tightened around my legs, pulling me closer, anchoring me to him as the kiss deepened. The cool water lapped against my skin, a sharp contrast to the heat building between us. His hand cupped the side of my face, his fingers threading into my damp hair, holding me there as though afraid I might slip away. I melted into him, my hands finding his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath the water. It was a kiss that spoke volumes, of want, of hunger, of a connection I didn't fully understand but couldn't deny. When he finally pulled back, it was only enough to rest his forehead against mine. His breath mingled with mine, shallow and unsteady, and the air between us felt charged, electric. "You don't understand what you've done," he murmured, his voice almost a whisper. "What it means for me to come to you like this, to feel you every time you are near the water." I looked up at him, my chest heaving, my mind spinning with the weight of his words. "Then tell me," I said softly, my voice trembling. "Help me understand." For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression a mixture of longing and something deeper, something almost painful. His tail loosened its hold around my legs, but it didn't release me entirely. "You've tied yourself to the sea now," he said, his lips brushing against my temple as he spoke. And to me, the kiss lingered in my mind, every sensation vivid and unforgettable, the taste of salt on his lips, the feel of his fingers tangled in my hair, the way his tail anchored me so possessively. Even as the intensity ebbed, we didn't part entirely. His forehead rested lightly against mine, our breaths mingling, the ocean lapping softly around us. "I've always felt," I began, my voice unsteady, but I forced myself to continue. "I've always felt called by the sea, as if it were a part of me. Even as a child, I loved to swim. I learned before I could even walk properly. My parents used to say I was half fish because I spent so much time in the water." His lips curved into a soft smile, one that seemed to hold both amusement and something deeper. His hand lifted to my face, his fingers trailing along my cheek with a gentleness that made my skin tingle. "Even though you were born on land, to the humans," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, "you're a daughter of the sea. It has always known you, even if you didn't yet know yourself." The sincerity in his words stirred something deep within me, an ache I hadn't realized I was carrying. His hand slid down to cradle my jaw, his thumb brushing lightly over my cheekbone, and then his lips found mine again. This kiss was softer than the last, but no less consuming, a slow, deliberate exploration that made my heart race. When we finally broke apart, his gaze held mine, piercing and unrelenting. I was keenly aware of the way his tail still coiled around my legs, holding me close. The pressure was firm but not restrictive, a constant reminder of his presence, his power. But as the silence stretched between us, my gaze drifted downward, past his chest, to where his tail shimmered just beneath the water's surface. I couldn't help it, it wasn't deliberate, but the sensation was impossible to ignore. I felt him. His manhood, smooth and firm, pressed against my leg beneath the water. Heat rushed to my cheeks as I realized what I was feeling. My eyes darted back up to his face, but it was too late, he had noticed. The corner of his mouth twitched in a knowing smile, his expression equal parts amused and curious. "Does it bother you?" he asked, his voice low and teasing. I swallowed hard, shaking my head. "No," I replied quickly, though my voice betrayed my nervousness. His smile widened slightly, his tone shifting to something deeper, more intimate. "You keep staring," he said, tilting his head. "In the water, below. You seem curious." I hesitated, the words caught in my throat. "It just feels so smooth," I admitted, barely above a whisper. He chuckled softly, the sound rich and resonant, like the rumble of waves against the shore. "Would you like to stroke it?" he asked, his voice laced with gentle amusement, though there was an undeniable edge of seriousness in his tone. My hand moved before I could think, as if guided by some instinct I couldn't explain. I reached down, the water parting around my fingers, and touched him. The sensation was startling, nothing like I had imagined. His skin was impossibly smooth, like silk warmed by the sun, and yet beneath that softness, there was an undeniable firmness, a strength that made my breath hitch. He was thick, solid, but so flawlessly smooth that there wasn't a single crease or imperfection, just a seamless expanse of perfect skin. A soft, shuddering breath escaped him, and I glanced up to see his eyes half-lidded, his expression unreadable but undeniably affected. His tail tightened ever so slightly around my legs, pulling me closer as his hand came up to cradle the back of my head. "You see?" he murmured, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "The sea has no rough edges. It's smooth, infinite, and unrelenting. Just like me." I couldn't reply, my words lost as my fingers lingered, exploring the foreign yet fascinating texture beneath the water. The intimacy of the moment hung heavily between us, the weight of unspoken possibilities pressing down like the tide. "Does it still intrigue you?" he asked, his lips close to my ear now, his breath warm against my skin. I nodded, unable to lie, even if I wanted to. "Yes." His lips brushed the corner of my mouth, his voice a low hum. "Then don't stop." Chapter 5. And I didn't stop. My fingers continued their delicate exploration, tracing the impossibly smooth surface beneath the water. I let my touch linger, drawing soft, slow circles, feeling the heat radiating from him even beneath the cool embrace of the sea. It was as though the ocean itself conspired to hide this moment, its gentle waves lapping against us in rhythmic secrecy, cloaking us in a world that belonged only to him and me. As my fingers pressed a little more firmly, wrapping around him with hesitant curiosity, I felt his tail twitch, a slight shudder rippling through the water around us. It was subtle, yet undeniable, and when I looked up, I found his face bathed in an expression I hadn't seen before. His eyelids were heavy, his lips slightly parted, and there was a quiet vulnerability in his gaze, as though he was letting me see a side of him he rarely revealed. He was enjoying it, every gentle stroke, every curve of my fingers along his unearthly smoothness. There was something deeply intimate in the way he responded, not with words but with the subtle shift of his body, the quiet tension in his muscles, and the faint tremor that traveled through his tail where it coiled around my legs. His hand, strong and yet so careful, slipped to the small of my back, pulling me closer. The water seemed to rise between us, warm and soft, cradling our connection as though the sea itself wished to embrace what was happening. I gasped softly at the sudden nearness, my chest brushing lightly against his as his presence surrounded me completely. I felt his nose graze beneath my ear, the faintest touch of his breath against my skin as he exhaled, slow and unsteady. He released a soft sound, something between a sigh and a murmur, a sound that sent a shiver cascading through me, tightening the already fragile thread that bound us in that moment. "You're exquisite," he murmured, the words barely more than a whisper, carried by the ocean breeze and the stillness between us. His voice held a richness, a depth that resonated like the ocean's endless depths, and I felt it as much as I heard it. My hand moved instinctively now, with more confidence, more curiosity. I could feel the faint pulse of life beneath the smooth surface, a quiet rhythm that echoed like the tide itself. As my fingers tightened ever so slightly, stroking upward and then back down, his tail responded again, curling just a bit more firmly around my legs, The heat of him, the way he seemed to tremble under my touch, made me feel as though I had found something secret and sacred. His lips brushed my jawline now, trailing the faintest path toward my temple, and I felt his hand at my back pull me so close that there was no longer any distance between us, only the sea and the moment we shared. My breath hitched when he whispered again, his voice a quiet plea, an invitation wrapped in intimacy. "You feel like you were made for this," he said, his words warm against my skin. "For me." And as the water shimmered around us, catching the last traces of moonlight, I found myself unable to look away from him. There was no world beyond the waves, beyond the way his body responded to my touch, and the way my own heart traced in tandem. It was as if the sea had bound us together, its ancient, untamed currents pulling us into something we couldn't name, but couldn't resist. In a sudden, fluid motion, his tail flicked powerfully beneath us, propelling us effortlessly through the water. I barely had time to gasp as the cool current rushed past my skin before my back met the unyielding surface of the rock wall. The jagged stone was slick from the sea, but it was solid, grounding me as he pressed closer, his body aligning with mine. His tail coiled around my legs again, this time with a deliberate purpose. I felt the strength in it as it shifted, the smooth, muscular movements parting my thighs just slightly, creating space that felt both intimate and exposed. My breath caught in my throat as his chest met mine, the firm planes of his body warm against the coolness of the water. His lips found mine with a searing softness, salty and intoxicating, like the very essence of the sea itself. The kiss was deeper this time, more consuming, his mouth moving against mine in a rhythm that left me breathless. The weight of him, the press of his body, felt inevitable, as if the tide itself had swept me into his embrace. My hand had never left him, still stroking the impossibly smooth surface beneath the water. His tail twitched again, a subtle, reactive movement that sent ripples through the stillness around us. My fingers, emboldened by the heat of his lips on mine, guided him lower, drawing him toward me, toward the aching need that had taken root deep inside. The water seemed to hum around us, the currents swirling gently as though they, too, were part of this connection, this pull that felt ancient and primal. His hand slid up my side, tracing the curve of my waist before settling firmly on my hip, anchoring me against the rock. His other hand braced against the wall near my head, his fingers spread wide as if to hold himself steady in the midst of this overwhelming closeness. I felt the warmth of him as he drew nearer, his smoothness brushing against the sensitive skin of my inner thigh. The sensation sent a shiver coursing through me, and I couldn't suppress the soft sound that escaped my lips, caught between surprise and longing. His eyes met mine then, dark and filled with a depth that seemed endless, like the deepest trenches of the ocean. There was a question in them, a wordless plea for permission, for understanding, and I nodded without hesitation, my body answering before my mind could catch up. "You're trembling," he whispered, his voice low and rough, laced with something that sounded like awe. My voice faltered, lost in the intensity of the moment. "It's you. You make me feel like this." A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips, but it was soft, reverent. "You feel like the ocean, wild and untamed," he murmured, his fingers brushing a strand of wet hair from my face. "Like you belong here, with me." His lips found mine again, silencing any reply I might have given. The kiss was slower this time, deeper, as if he were tasting every word I couldn't say. And beneath the water, my hand continued its gentle guidance, drawing him closer, the heat of him now undeniable against me. The rock pressed firm against my back, grounding me in contrast to the fluidity of his movements, the way his tail tightened and shifted, holding me with a strength that felt both protective and possessive. My legs parted further under his guidance, and I felt him align with me, his smoothness brushing against my center with an intimacy that left me trembling anew. The water held us, cradling our bodies as if it were a silent witness to this moment, the waves lapping softly against the rock as his lips traced a path from my mouth to my jawline, then to the hollow beneath my ear. "Tell me," he murmured, his voice a whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "What do you feel?" I closed my eyes, my breath unsteady as I answered honestly, my voice barely audible. "Everything." The moment his smoothness pressed against me, my breath hitched, the weight of his presence tangible and overwhelming. He moved with such careful precision, easing into me as though he feared breaking me, his gentleness a stark contrast to the raw strength I could feel in the taut coils of his tail and the powerful chest pressing against mine. My body tensed, instinctively adjusting to the sheer size of him. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, smooth, seamless, and impossibly thick, stretching me in ways I hadn't known I could accommodate. I clung to his shoulders, my nails pressing lightly into his skin, as I felt him pause, giving me the time I needed to acclimate, his dark eyes watching mine with an intensity that seemed to speak without words. "Are you okay?" he murmured, his voice low and rough, like the rumble of distant waves breaking against the shore. I nodded, unable to form coherent words as I took a shaky breath, my body relaxing by degrees. "Yes," I whispered. His lips curved into a faint smile, one hand brushing against my cheek, the other gripping the rock wall beside us. "Good," he said softly, and then he pressed deeper, inch by inch, until I could feel the fullness of him seated entirely within me. The sensation was exquisite, overwhelming, and I gasped, clinging tighter to him as his tail coiled more securely around my legs, anchoring us both in place. For a moment, neither of us moved, suspended in the warm embrace of the water and each other, as if time itself had paused to honor this connection. Then, with a flick of his tail, he shifted. The powerful motion created a subtle pull and then a deeper thrust, his body driving into mine with a controlled force that made my breath catch. My back pressed harder against the rock wall, the cool, slick surface grounding me as he began to move. Each movement was deliberate, his tail propelling him forward with a grace and strength that left me awestruck. His hands found my hips, holding me steady as his rhythm deepened, the collision of our bodies sending ripples through the water around us. I could feel the power in every motion, the way his tail flicked to build momentum, the way his body pressed against mine, skin to skin, as if we were two parts of a whole finally coming together. His lips found mine again, capturing my soft cries as the intensity between us grew. The kiss was fierce, filled with the salty taste of the sea and the undeniable hunger that had been building between us since the moment we first met. His lips moved against mine as though he were trying to consume me, his fingers pressing into the small of my back, holding me tighter as his body surged against mine with increasing fervor. The water around us seemed alive, swirling and moving with the rhythm of our bodies, carrying the heat and the intimacy of our connection. The waves lapped against the rock, soft and persistent, a gentle echo of the force building between us. I could feel every inch of him, the smoothness sliding against me, filling me completely, while his tail tightened its grip on my legs, pulling me even closer as if he couldn't bear the thought of any space between us. His movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, each thrust sending a delicious shiver through me as I surrendered completely to the moment. I tilted my head back, my lips parting as a soft sound escaped me, lost to the sea. He pressed his mouth to my neck, his teeth grazing my skin with a teasing edge before his tongue soothed the spot, leaving me trembling in his embrace. "Tell me," he murmured against my skin, his voice husky and thick with desire. "Tell me how this feels." I met his gaze, my breath uneven as I struggled to find the words. "Like I'm drowning," I whispered, my voice raw with emotion, "but I don't want to be saved." A satisfied growl rumbled low in his throat, and he captured my lips once more, his movements growing more powerful, each thrust sending shock waves through my body. The rock behind me and the water around us seemed to fade away, leaving only him, the strength of his body, the heat of his touch, the connection that felt as boundless and untamed as the ocean itself. As his rhythm reached its peak, his movements became more erratic, a wild energy surging through him with each thrust. The powerful flick of his tail drove him deeper still, and then I felt it, a sudden, overwhelming warmth filling me, his release hot and undeniable as it spread through me. A soft gasp escaped my lips as he groaned low against my neck, his grip on my hips tightening, his entire body shuddering as the last waves of pleasure consumed us both. He didn't pull away immediately. Instead, he remained inside me, his body pressed tightly against mine as we both lingered in the haze of our shared climax. His chest rose and fell against mine, his breath warm and heavy on my skin. I rested my forehead against his, the intimacy of the moment grounding me as my trembling hands clung to his shoulders. For a while, we stayed like that, suspended in the water, his tail still coiled loosely around my legs. Then, with a soft smile, he leaned back slightly, brushing a strand of wet hair from my face. "Come," he said, his voice low and soft, like a melody carried on the waves. "Let's rest under the moon." Before I could respond, he guided me gently, his tail unfurling from my legs as he swam us toward a nearby rock bathed in the moon's silvery glow. The cool night air kissed my skin as I climbed onto the smooth surface, the wet fabric of my dress clinging to me like a second skin. I could feel it plastered against my curves, outlining every detail, and I was acutely aware of how it clung to my breasts, perched and firm, the fabric sheer enough now to reveal the faintest hint of my nipples beneath it, like shadows through a veil. My legs trembled as I settled onto the rock, the aftermath of what we had shared still humming through my body. He followed, lifting himself effortlessly onto the stone beside me. His tail, now relaxed, lay against the surface, occasionally flicking water droplets into the air. His manhood, smooth and resting just before his tail began, was visible under the moonlight, a reminder of the wild, untamed creature that he was. I couldn't help but stare, my cheeks warming at the sight of him, and he noticed, his lips curving into an amused smile. "Do I intrigue you that much?" he teased, his voice carrying a playful edge. I glanced away, a smile tugging at my lips as I tucked a wet strand of hair behind my ear. "You fascinate me," I admitted, my voice soft. "You're unlike anything I've ever known." He reached out, his fingers tracing a path down my leg, his touch gentle and almost reverent. "And you," he murmured, "are unlike any human I've ever encountered. I can feel it, your connection to the water." I nodded, my gaze meeting his. "It always was," I said quietly. "I learned to swim before I could even walk properly. The sea has always felt like home. Like it's a part of me." His smile deepened, a quiet pride flickering in his eyes. "That's because you are a daughter of the sea," he said, his tone rich with certainty. "Though you were born on land, the ocean has claimed you as its own." His words sent a shiver through me, and he leaned closer, his hand cupping my cheek. "Do you feel it now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The pull of the water? The connection between us?" I nodded again, unable to look away from his dark, captivating eyes. "I feel it," I whispered. He leaned in, his lips brushing against mine, the salt of the sea still lingering between us. The kiss was soft at first, tender, but it deepened quickly, his hand sliding to the small of my back, pulling me closer. My fingers found his chest, tracing the smooth, firm planes of his skin as the world around us seemed to fade, leaving only the gentle sound of the waves and the warmth of his touch. When we finally broke apart, his gaze lingered on me, his thumb gently stroking my cheek. "I don't want this moment to end," he said softly. "Neither do I," I replied, my voice trembling with honesty. The moonlight danced on the water, casting shimmering reflections onto the rock, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace. A soft laugh escaped me, light and unbidden, just as the first fingers of dawn began to stretch across the horizon, painting the sky with hues of gold and pink. The tranquil silence of the sea seemed to amplify the sound, and his curious gaze snapped to me, his head tilting slightly. "What is it?" he asked, his voice a low murmur, laced with intrigue. I turned to him, the warmth of his presence still settling into my skin, and shook my head lightly, a small smile playing on my lips. "I don't even know your name," I admitted, the realization almost absurd after the intimacy we had shared. He blinked, surprised for a moment, and then his lips curved into that sly, knowing smile I was already growing fond of. "Nivian," he said softly, the syllables rolling off his tongue like a melody. "You may call me Niv, if it pleases you." "Pronounced Nihvan, Nivian," I repeated, tasting the name, letting it linger. It felt ancient and powerful, yet soft, like the sea itself. "It suits you." He chuckled, low and rich, his hand brushing against mine. "And you?" he prompted, his gaze searching mine. What should I call the woman who calls to the sea? Gorina, I said simply, watching how the name settled on his lips as if he had already known it. Gorina, he echoed, his voice wrapping around it like a caress. Beautiful. Mikira. We shared a lingering look, the space between us filled with unspoken connection, until a subtle change in the air made me glance at the horizon. The sun was beginning to rise further, its golden light cresting over the waves, casting an ethereal glow over us. Nivihan's expression softened, but I could see the faint trace of reluctance in his eyes. He didn't need to say it, I knew he had to leave. The rising sun wasn't his realm, the sea and the night were where he belonged. Will I see you again? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, though the question carried the weight of my longing. His smile returned, though it was tinged with something bittersweet. You and I, he said gently, reaching out to trace his thumb along my cheekbone, are now a part of each other. I could sense you before, whenever you were near the sea. Now, I will sense you always, as you will sense me. I nod slowly, understanding more than I let on. The bond between us is deeper than words, something that flows like the tide, constant and inevitable. A smile tugs at my lips, and I meet his gaze one last time. Until tonight, then, I say, the promise of those words hanging between us, fragile but certain. Without another word, he leans in, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead, the sensation lingering long after his lips have gone. His touch is the sea itself, both gentle and fierce, and as he pulls back, he dives effortlessly into the water, disappearing beneath the surface with a single, fluid motion. I sit there for a moment, watching the place where he vanished, the connection between us still thrumming in the air. The water, now calm, laps gently at the rock where I sit. A soft sigh escapes me as I slowly get to my feet, my legs still unsteady from what we shared. Eventually, I turned and made my way back to the house. The sun was climbing higher now, its warmth touching my damp skin as I walked. My dress clung to me, the salty air wrapping around me like his presence still lingered. When I reached the house, I glanced back at the beach, a soft smile tugging at my lips. Tonight. The thought carried me through the door, my heart beating in rhythm with the distant waves. The sea will always call to me, but now, it calls with his voice, and somehow, I know that no matter where I am, he will always be there, just beneath the surface. Chapter 6. I felt too alive to even think of sleep. My body hummed with energy, my skin still tingling from his touch, and my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The sunlight streaming through the windows only added to my restlessness. It was morning now, and though I should have felt the exhaustion of a sleepless night, all I felt was an insatiable curiosity, and a need for answers. Throwing on a light sweater and slipping into a pair of flats, I decided to head to town, to the library. The idea had struck me as I stood by the window, staring out at the endless blue horizon. He had called me a daughter of the sea. The phrase had lingered in my mind, echoing with an almost ancient weight. I had never thought of myself as anything but an ordinary woman, yet his words suggested something more, something I needed to understand. The walk into town was brisk, the salty breeze clinging to my skin and hair, a reminder of the night before. The cobblestone streets were quiet this early in the morning, save for the occasional shopkeeper setting out displays or the distant hum of a motorbike passing by. I found comfort in the solitude, my thoughts uninterrupted as I made my way to the library, a quaint, stone building nestled in the heart of the town square. Inside, the familiar scent of aged paper and polished wood enveloped me. The librarian, an older woman with kind eyes and a penchant for cardigans, greeted me with a nod as I made my way to the section that housed mythology and folklore. It was tucked away in the back, a quiet corner that felt almost forgotten by time. I scanned the shelves, my fingers trailing over spines of books with titles like Legends of the Deep, Mysteries of the Ocean, and Mythical Beings, a study of lore. I pulled down anything that seemed remotely relevant and carried the growing stack to a nearby table. Settling in, I flipped open the first book, my heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Page after page revealed fragments of stories, some whimsical, some dark. Mermaids luring sailors to their doom with songs as sweet as honey. Mermen who guarded treasures in underwater kingdoms. Tales of sea creatures both benevolent and vengeful, their actions as unpredictable as the tides. But nothing quite matched him. Nothing quite matched Nivian. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an old, leather-bound tome with faded gold lettering that I found something that resonated. The chapter was titled Children of the Sea. My pulse quickened as I read. It is said that some humans carry the mark of the sea in their souls. They are drawn to water as moths are to flame, their hearts forever tied to the ebb and flow of the ocean's tides. These individuals, often called the daughters or sons of the sea, are believed to be descendants of ancient unions between sea dwellers and land dwellers. They possess a natural affinity for water, an innate ability to swim before they can even walk, and a profound connection to the creatures of the deep. The words struck a chord deep within me. Memories surfaced, of my father teasing me about being part fish because I learned to swim before I could even toddle. Of how I always felt at peace in the water, how the sea seemed to call to me in ways I couldn't explain. I read on, devouring every word. The text spoke of a bond that could form between sea dwellers and their human kin, an unbreakable link, born of shared essence. It was rare, the book claimed, and often fleeting, but when it happened, it was said to be as eternal as the ocean itself. I closed the book and leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Could this be what Nivian meant when he called me a daughter of the sea? Was there something in my blood, in my very being, that tied me to him and his world? The thought was as exhilarating as it was overwhelming. The morning sunlight streamed through the library windows, casting golden patterns on the wooden table. I traced them absent-mindedly, the words I'd read swirling in my mind. I needed to know more. About him, about this bond, about what it meant to be a daughter of the sea. Gathering the books, I borrowed the ones I hadn't finished and tucked them under my arm. As I stepped back into the bustling streets of the now-awake town, I felt the pull of the sea stronger than ever. I knew where I'd be when the sun dipped below the horizon once more, waiting for him, with questions and a heart that was slowly beginning to understand the depths of its own longing. Back home, I wasted no time. I laid the books out on the dining table, their spines cracked open to chapters on legends, sea lore, and whispers of ancient bonds. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the rhythmic rustling of pages as I flipped through them. The words blurred together at times, my mind working overtime to piece together every fragment of information I could find. I scribbled notes onto a pad of paper, trying to weave a thread of understanding between the myths and the man, no, the being, I'd encountered. The term daughter of the sea came up more than once, often in the context of someone marked by the ocean's embrace, destined to be drawn to it their entire life. There were stories of women who disappeared into the waves, never to be seen again, and tales of children born with eyes the color of stormy skies or hair that shimmered like sea foam. I couldn't help but wonder, was my connection to the sea more than just a love for it? Could it truly be something in my blood, my very essence? I moved from book to book, devouring passages about mermen. Most painted them as enigmatic and dangerous, predators of the deep who lured humans to their deaths. But none of those descriptions fit Nivian. He was wild, yes, but there was a gentleness in him, a curiosity that mirrored my own. He hadn't dragged me under or sought to harm me, he had drawn me closer, in ways I hadn't thought possible. Hours passed unnoticed as I delved deeper into the texts, my notes sprawling into a chaotic but satisfying mess. The light outside began to dim, the golden hues of the afternoon melting into the cooler shades of twilight. It wasn't until the soft chirping of crickets reached my ears that I glanced up from the pages. The window was streaked with the amber glow of the setting sun, and beyond it, the sky was painted in brilliant strokes of orange, pink, and violet. My heart skipped a beat. It was almost dusk. I closed the book I'd been reading, my fingers lingering on its worn cover. For a moment, I considered staying, grounding myself in the safety of my home. But the pull of the sea was too strong, an invisible thread tugging at my very soul. The air inside felt stifling, heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. I needed to go, to see him again. Gathering my notes into a neat pile, I left them on the table, their edges curling slightly under the weight of my pen. My heart thrummed with anticipation as I grabbed a shawl and headed out, the soft breeze carrying the scent of salt and seaweed as I made my way to the shore. The books and myths could wait. Whatever answers I sought, I knew he held them too. And tonight, I would face him again, with the waves as our witnesses. Just as I reached for the door, a loud, insistent grumble erupted from my stomach, echoing in the quiet house. I paused mid-step, startled by the sound, before breaking into a small, self-conscious laugh. "Guess I've been too caught up to eat," I murmured to myself, shaking my head. The thrill of the day had swept past me, leaving no room for mundane necessities like food. Chapter 7. I made my way to the kitchen, quickly gathering some ingredients. As I spread butter onto slices of bread and layered them with cheese, ham, and fresh greens, I giggled at the simplicity of the task. Somehow, the thought of sharing something as ordinary as sandwiches with someone as extraordinary as Nivian amused me. I cut each sandwich into cute, neat triangles and wrapped them carefully before tucking them into a small bag. With the snacks in hand, I headed to the beach. The air was cooler now, the gentle hum of the waves growing louder as I neared the shore. The sky was awash with twilight hues, a soft glow lingering over the horizon. He appeared almost instantly, as though he had been waiting, watching for me. His form emerged from the waves with an effortless grace, water cascading off his shoulders like liquid silver. His tail glimmered in the dying light, the fin swaying gently as he propelled himself closer to shore. To my surprise, instead of staying in the shallows, he came closer still, his powerful arms pulling him through the surf until he was seated on the wet sand beside me. His tail remained submerged in the water, the gentle ripples lapping around it. I smiled, slightly breathless from his sudden closeness. "You always seem to know when I'm here," I said softly. Nivian tilted his head, his damp hair catching the last light of day. "I told you, I can sense you now," he replied, his voice low and smooth, carrying a faint hint of amusement. "You're part of the sea. I feel it whenever you're near." "That's a little unfair," I teased. "I don't have that advantage. I can't just sense you whenever I want." He chuckled, the sound warm and rich like the tide meeting the shore. "You don't need to. You come to me because you want to. That's enough." For a moment, the air between us felt charged, his words settling over me like a gentle wave. I cleared my throat, breaking the tension with a grin. "Well, since you're here, I thought we could share something." I reached into the bag and pulled out the sandwiches, placing them neatly between us on the sand. Nivian leaned forward slightly, his curiosity evident. "What is this?" "Sandwiches," I said, suppressing a laugh at the puzzled expression on his face. "Just food. Try it." He hesitated, then picked up one of the triangles, inspecting it closely. His long fingers brushed the edges of the bread, his movements slow and deliberate. Finally, he took a small bite, chewing thoughtfully. I watched, trying to read his reaction. "Well?" His lips curved into a faint smile. "Todd," he admitted, taking another bite. "But not unpleasant." "That's a very diplomatic way of saying you don't like it," I teased, taking one for myself and biting into it. He laughed softly, his tail flicking lightly in the water. "It's different. I've never eaten anything like this before." "Well, I'll have you know, these are some of the finest sandwiches I've ever made," I replied with mock indignation, gesturing to the bag. His gaze softened, the corners of his mouth lifting in a way that made my chest tighten. "Then I'm honored," he said simply, taking another bite. We ate in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the waves and the occasional rustle of the bag between us creating a soothing backdrop. Every now and then, I glanced at him, watching as he ate with quiet interest, as though savoring not just the food but the moment itself. "I went to the library today, did some research on sea dwellers." Nivian's lips quirked upward, amusement dancing in his gaze as he leaned back on his arms, his tail flicking lazily in the water behind him. "Sea dwellers," he repeated with a soft laugh, his voice like the tide, gentle yet deep. "Is that what they call us on land?" I smiled, shrugging playfully. Well, I wasn't sure what else to call you other than Merman or that. It's not every day you meet someone with a tail instead of legs. He smirked, his sharp eyes catching mine as he tilted his head. Fair point. But sea dwellers? It makes us sound like ghosts or myths. I laughed lightly. All right, maybe it wasn't the best choice of words. But I did read something more intriguing. Daughters and sons of the sea. That's what I'm curious about. Nivian's expression shifted slightly, the humor in his gaze softening into something more thoughtful. Daughters and sons of the sea, he murmured, as though the words held weight he hadn't spoken aloud in a long time. It's a name we don't use lightly. Why not? I asked, leaning forward slightly, eager to catch every nuance of his voice. I couldn't find much about it. Just fragments, really, vague mentions in old books and myths. So, I thought. Maybe you'd know more? He regarded me for a long moment, the moonlight catching on the sharp lines of his face, the shadows of the water rippling across his skin. Then, with a slow exhale, he began to speak. It's not just a name, he said, his voice low and steady. It's a bond. A connection that runs deeper than the currents of the ocean. Daughters and sons of the sea. They're not just born, they're called. Not everyone hears it. Not everyone feels it. His words sent a shiver through me, though the night was warm. Called? I echoed, barely above a whisper. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. It's not about where you're born or who your parents are. It's about the sea choosing you. The ones it calls are tied to it in ways others can't understand. It's in their blood, their breath. Their very being. I swallowed, his words stirring something deep within me. You said you could sense me. Even before we met. Is that why? Nivian smiled faintly, his fingers brushing against the sand as though grounding himself. Yes. You're more than just someone who loves the ocean. You belong to it. Even if you've spent your life on land, the sea knows its own. I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. Every chance I had, I was in the water. It's always felt like home. Nivian's smile deepened, a flicker of pride glinting in his eyes. And that's why I called you a daughter of the sea. Because you are. The sea chose you long ago, even if you didn't know it. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. I felt a rush of emotions, joy, awe, even a strange sense of belonging I couldn't quite name. Breaking the silence, I asked softly, is there more to it? More to being a daughter or son of the sea? Nivian's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the moon hung low over the dark water. There's always more. The sea's secrets run deep, and some of them. Even I don't know. He turned back to me, his expression tender yet enigmatic. But I can teach you what I do know, if you want to learn. I nodded, my heart thudding in my chest. I do. Then we'll start tonight, he said, his voice carrying a promise that sent a thrill through me. But first. His eyes flicked to the small pile of sandwiches between us, and his grin returned, playful and warm. Let's finish these. I think I'm starting to like them. I laughed, the tension easing as I picked up another sandwich and handed it to him. Yet, even as we ate, his words lingered in my mind, their weight sinking deeper into my soul like a stone dropped into the ocean's depths. Chapter 8. As we ate, the conversation slowed, and the air between us grew quieter. The night wrapped around us like a soft, silken veil, with the moonlight reflecting off the waves in a shimmering dance. Nivian's presence beside me felt so natural, yet electrifying. Every movement of his tail sent ripples of water across the shore, and I caught myself glancing at him more than once, at the way his hair glimmered in the faint light, damp strands clinging to his sharp jawline, and the way his eyes held an otherworldly glow that seemed to pierce right through me. He noticed. Of course, he noticed. You keep looking at me, he said, his voice low, laced with something playful yet undeniably intimate. His eyes met mine, a flicker of amusement in their depths. What's on your mind, little daughter of the sea? The nickname sent a flutter through my chest, like waves lapping gently at the shore. I'm just trying to take this all in, I admitted, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. This connection I never realized I had with the sea, it feels surreal. Navian tilted his head, studying me as if I were a puzzle he was piecing together. It's not surreal, he murmured, leaning in just slightly. His hand reached out, his fingers brushing a stray crumb from my cheek, lingering a second too long against my skin. His touch sent a spark through me, a heat that settled low in my belly. It's who you are. You've always been a part of this world, you just needed someone to remind you. His words made my heart race, and I found myself leaning into his touch without realizing it. His hand moved, his fingers tracing a soft path down to my jaw, then tilting my chin so I couldn't look away from him. You belong here, Garina, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was almost swallowed by the sound of the waves. With me. The weight of his gaze, the closeness of his body, the warmth of his hand against my skin, it was all too much, and not enough at the same time. My breath hitched, my cheeks flushing, and I wasn't sure if it was from his words or the way his thumb gently caressed the edge of my jawline, making my skin tingle. I feel it, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I've always felt it, even when I didn't understand what it was. It's like the sea's been waiting for me. And now, so have you. Nivian's lips curved into a smile, soft yet edged with something primal, something untamed. He leaned closer, and his nose brushed the curve of my cheek, his breath warm against my skin. I've been waiting for you far longer than you can imagine, he murmured, his voice sending shivers down my spine. Before I could respond, his lips found mine, stealing whatever words I might have said. The kiss was slow, deliberate, acclaiming as much as it was a sharing. His lips were salty from the sea, but warm and soft, and they moved against mine with a gentleness that belied the strength I knew he carried in every fiber of his being. His hand slipped to the nape of my neck, holding me there as the kiss deepened. My heart pounded in my chest, every nerve in my body alive and buzzing. I felt his tail shift beside me, brushing against my leg, the smoothness of it a constant reminder of the otherworldly beauty that was Nivian. When we finally parted, I was breathless, my forehead resting against his as I tried to steady myself. His hand moved to my waist, grounding me, holding me as though he were afraid I might slip away. Nivian, I murmured, my fingers curling against his chest. Will it always feel like this? His smile was soft, tender, as his hand caressed the curve of my waist. If I have anything to do with it, yes, he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. You and I. We're bound now, Garina. The sea, the tides, they'll keep pulling us together, no matter where you go. I shivered at his words, both from their meaning and the way his fingers trailed up my arm, leaving a path of warmth in their wake. Then don't let me go, I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. I won't, he promised, his lips brushing against my temple. Not now. Not ever. For a while, we just sat there, the ocean lapping at his tail and my legs, the world fading away until it was just the two of us. I leaned against him, my head resting on his shoulder as his arm wrapped around me. I gazed at him, unsure, but the question was on the tip of my tongue, so I finally asked it. Can I breathe underwater? His expression softened, the moonlight catching the deep azure of his eyes. He tilted his head slightly, considering the question. Have you ever tried? I chuckled softly, the idea sounding absurd in my own mind. No, not really. I didn't feel like drowning. A soft laugh escaped him, the sound rich and warm, vibrating through the air between us. A fair point, he agreed, but now. With me by your side, you need not fear such things. My heart skipped, the sincerity in his words lacing through the evening air. I looked at the water, the same dark depths that had once felt so distant, now drawing me closer, making me yearn to understand it, to become part of it. But, can it be different? Could I swim with you, far beyond the surface? Nivian's expression shifted, a flicker of something tender in his eyes. He reached out, cupping my cheek with his hand, his fingers cool against my warm skin. You've always been a part of it, Garina. The sea has always called to you, in ways you've only begun to understand. Swimming with me. It would be more than just a shared moment. It would be a connection, one that binds us together in ways words can't fully explain. I leaned into his touch, feeling the pull of his words as much as I felt the pull of the sea. The thought of diving into those waters, feeling them surround me, knowing I wouldn't be alone. The idea was intoxicating. But still, doubt lingered. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. "I'm not like you. I don't have what you have. Your strength, your connection to the water." His lips curled into a smile, though it was gentle, as if he understood the vulnerability in my question. "You have something even greater. You have the heart of the sea, Karina. And that is all you need." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts as the gentle sway of the water lapped at my feet. There was something undeniably powerful about him, something that made me believe his words, even if a part of me still struggled to comprehend the full weight of them. "You really believe that?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Nivian's fingers trailed down my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. "I don't just believe it. I know it." And in that moment, I realized that he wasn't just speaking about the sea anymore. He was speaking about us. There was an undeniable truth in his words, in the way his presence seemed to fill the space around us, a presence that offered both comfort and thrill. My hand found its way to his, my fingers entwining with his webbed ones, feeling the subtle strength in his touch. "Then take me with you," I murmured, the words coming easily now. "Show me what lies beneath the surface." Nivian's eyes gleamed with something fierce and tender all at once. Slowly, he leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine, and I could feel the warmth of his breath, the pulse of his heartbeat against my chest. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. "Yes. I think I am." And with that, he gave a soft smile, before he began to pull me gently toward the water, his strong tail sending waves that lapped around us. The moment we were submerged, the coolness of the sea embraced us, and I realized, this was only the beginning of something far greater than I could have ever imagined. Chapter 9. As soon as the water enveloped us, I felt an immediate shift, like a deep breath I had been holding for my entire life, released all at once. It was as though the sea was welcoming me, drawing me into its depths with the same ease as it had drawn Nivian. The coldness of it was stark at first, but with him beside me, I quickly adapted, the chill fading as we sank deeper, together. Nivian's tail swayed gently behind us, propelling us further into the darkness, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt safe. Like we were gliding through an intimate embrace, the weightlessness of the water carrying us, flowing around us like it had always been meant to. His hand, still holding mine, squeezed gently as we descended. I looked up, seeing the faint glimmers of moonlight breaking through the surface, casting silvery beams that flickered like stars beneath the water. It was beautiful in a way I had never truly understood until now. I turned to him, my voice trembling slightly as I spoke. It's amazing. It's like I've always belonged here." He smiled, that same knowing smile that made me feel seen in ways I couldn't explain. "You have. And now, we are one with the sea." We dove deeper, the light from the surface dimming as we ventured into the unknown. But with each passing moment, I felt less and less fear. Instead, I felt connected. To him. To the water. To something ancient, something eternal. I had never felt this free before, like I could let go of everything, the world, the noise, the expectations. Here, in the embrace of the sea, there was only us. His fingers brushed my hair, his touch gentle, as though every movement was measured in tenderness. It sent a ripple of warmth through my body, despite the coolness of the water. He moved closer, his lips meeting mine once more, but this kiss was different, less urgent, more lingering, as though the very act of being submerged in this world made every moment more sacred. The kiss deepened, his hands now pulling me closer, feeling the rhythm of our connection. There was no rush, no need for words. His chest pressed against mine, and I could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath the water, synchronizing with my own. We swam in silence, letting the current guide us, letting the water surround us. As we drifted deeper, I could sense the pull of the sea, an invisible force that seemed to hum through every part of me. It was as though the ocean itself had a heartbeat, a pulse that was shared by both of us, woven through our souls. I thought of the world above, of the land I had known, but it felt so distant now. All that mattered was the present, here in this sacred space where we existed together. Nivian's eyes met mine again, and there was a glimmer of something more in his gaze, something ancient, something primal. "Are you ready to go further?" he asked, his voice resonating in the water, as though the very sound of it became part of the sea. I nodded, unable to speak, the weight of his question settling in my chest. I had never felt this alive, this in tune with the world around me. "Yes," I whispered, my voice barely a ripple in the vastness of the water. With that, he guided me deeper still, his tail flicking through the water, pulling us through the darkened depths. The further we swam, the more I felt a sense of belonging that transcended anything I had ever known. The sea wasn't just a part of me, it was a part of us, of the connection we had forged, something that no words could encapsulate. And as we swam deeper into the abyss, with the world above slipping further away, I knew that this moment, this feeling, would stay with me forever. I turned in his arms, the gentle sway of the water cradling us, and without hesitation, I pressed my lips to his. The kiss was heated, desperate, as if I could pour every unspoken word, every ounce of my yearning into him. When we pulled apart, just enough for a breath, I cupped his face in my hands, my voice trembling yet steady with resolve. "I want you, Nivian," I said, the words spilling out like a tide breaking through a dam. "I want to feel you inside me, to know you as deeply as you know me. I want to feel you in the way you say you feel me, no matter where I am. I need you, Niv. Please." He stilled for a moment, the only movement the slow flick of his tail as his arms tightened around me. His luminous gaze held mine, piercing and impossibly tender, as if he were searching for something deeper than my words, something buried in my soul. His lips parted, and his voice came soft but full of emotion, carried by the currents around us. "You don't know what it means to hear you say that." He brushed a thumb across my cheek, reverent. "I've been waiting for you, for centuries. 700 years, I've felt the faintest pull of you, even before you existed. The ocean whispered of you, its daughter. It showed me glimpses of a woman who would complete me, who would bring balance to my existence." His hand trailed down to rest over my heart, where I could feel its wild, thrumming beat. "And now you're here. Flesh and soul. And you're asking to claim me, just as I've claimed you." A small smile, full of longing and happiness, curved his lips. "You couldn't give me a greater gift than that, to share everything with you, to bind us so that you feel me as I feel you. It couldn't make me happier." My breath caught, and before I could speak, his lips claimed mine again, fiercely, possessively. It was a kiss that swallowed my doubts, my fears, leaving only the raw truth of us. With a swift flick of his tail, he propelled us downward, the water darkening as we descended toward the seafloor. The world above faded, leaving only the two of us bathed in the faint glow of bioluminescent coral. The sand beneath us was soft, shifting as he gently laid me down, his body hovering over mine, his tail curling around my legs to part them. His touch was everywhere, his hands tracing the curves of my body with a reverence that made my skin tingle despite the coolness of the water. My dress floated around me like a silken cloud, but it was no barrier to the heat radiating between us. His lips followed the path of his hands, trailing kisses along my jaw, my neck, my collarbone, as if memorizing every inch of me. And then I felt him, pressing against my core, his smoothness gliding against me with a gentleness that sent shivers rippling through my body. He moved slowly at first, allowing me to adjust, to take him fully. His thickness stretched me in a way that was both intense and intimate, filling me completely as he claimed me in the most primal, profound way. His tail flicked again, creating a powerful shift of momentum as he began to thrust, the rhythm building with each movement. The pressure of his body against mine, the way the water seemed to echo the waves of our passion, made the moment feel endless, eternal. His grip on me tightened, his hand cradling the small of my back as his other cupped my face, his forehead pressed to mine. "Mine," he murmured against my lips, his voice rough with emotion. "You're mine, and I'm yours." Always. I wrapped my arms around him, my fingers digging into the smooth, firm muscles of his back as our movements grew wilder, more frantic. The sea around us seemed to pulse with our rhythm, alive with our connection. When we reached our climax, it was as if the ocean itself trembled. His release filled me, a rush of heat that contrasted with the cool water around us. He stayed there, deep inside me, holding me close as we both caught our breath. For a long moment, we simply stayed entwined, the currents swirling gently around us. He finally shifted, his tail flicking once more as he gathered me in his arms and carried me upward, toward the surface. We broke through into the moonlight, and he carried me to a nearby rock outcropping. The wet fabric of my dress clung to my body as he set me down, the delicate material molding to my skin like a second layer. My chest heaved, my legs trembling as I sat there, still feeling the echoes of him inside me. Nivian's tail rested on the rock beside us, relaxed now, the tip flicking idly as he leaned against me. His hand stroked my thigh, his touch gentle, reverent, as if he couldn't stop himself from touching me. "You're a part of me now," he said softly, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin. "And I'm a part of you. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I'll feel you. And you'll feel me." I smiled, reaching up to cup his face. "Then we truly belong to each other." "Always," he replied, his lips brushing mine in a soft, lingering kiss. "Always." The end.